just lead, I'll follow.
Okay. Hey, what's up, America? Welcome to Goodnight America. It's the first episode, and I'll tell you this. Democracy is dying. The economy's going in the shitter. Everybody hates everybody. But if there's one thing that gives me hope for humanity, one thing that gives me hope for a better tomorrow, it's today's guest, John Graham. Thank you for being on.
I'm very glad that at this god-awful hour, I just got off a plane in the middle of the night, so I'm a little cross-eyed, but I will try to be coherent.
See, all you do is give to other people. So here's the thing about you. I think you were the most Christian-y Christian I've ever met. And from an atheist, that would sound like it's an insult, but it's not at all. You, and this word is horribly overused, but you were literally doing God's work, and it's incredible. I'll say this. We're going to get into your story for the second half of the show. Before we get into those, I want your opinion on some news stories that have to do vaguely with your expertise. But I think like 10 years ago, my wife and I were vegetarians for 5 years. It was the worst 5 years of my life. I don't know if you know this when you're a vegetarian. You can't eat steak or bacon. It's awful. But what happened was we watched the documentary. It's called Vegucated. And the premise was 6 New Yorkers go vegan for a month or something. And we thought that would be hilarious. Like they're going to go, oh, there's fake cheese on my pizza. It's terrible. No, it was bad. It was bad. They showed the inside of slaughterhouses. You saw that they were castrating bulls with bolt cutters and twisting the testicles off little baby piglets and the sexting of the chicken. The boys go right into the meat grinder. And it was awful. So we decided from that point on, we're not going to eat meat. And it, again, lasted 5 years. I think that's enough of a jail sentence, I think. But right after that, I consumed a lot of vegetarian and vegan sort of propaganda. One of the things that I heard was from this guy that he said that veganism, and I wasn't a vegan, I was a pescatarian because fish have no souls. But he said that veganism is the most passive form of activism that you can participate in. He said most people think they're good people because when they hear about something bad happening, they feel bad. They're on the side of the righteous, but they don't do anything. They're not activists in any particular direction. And he said simply by not buying leather belts or buying anything that animals are involved in that kills animals, you are being silently active and it helps. And I thought that is a really good point. Now, I'm back to doing nothing, no activism. Your form of activism is goddamn crazy. So let me just see if I get this right. You were a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah.
You were a children's home counselor, a substitute teacher, a truck driver, a fireman, a building contractor, a minister, and a journalist. And at 53, you found the Good Samaritan Home, which is a nonprofit that helps people restart their lives after prison. Now, I want people to think about how intense that is. You're not housing foster dogs or cats or children. You are housing criminals that have, or formerly incarcerated criminals that have nowhere else to go. That is a very difficult population to work with. And it's incredible that you do what you do. As a matter of fact, now you have a staff of 10 people and you've helped 2,500 people restart their lives. Unbelievable.
I never saw it coming. We started off, as I mentioned earlier, with just one man coming out of prison who needed a place because he was homeless. And I think Dr. King said it best. At the end of his life, he didn't want to be remembered for all the things he'd done. He just wanted to be remembered that he tried to do God's will, period. And that's it right there. As you can tell from my resume, I'm not very good at some things. I'm bright enough to be curious, but I'm not disciplined enough. Or actually, it's not discipline. It's the idea of I don't fit in well with the norm of society. Coming out of the 60s, we're always looking for something better. And so I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of detours. The best example was when I was a fireman. Great job. I should have stayed with it. But I saw myself sitting here every Thursday washing windows, every Wednesday running the vacuum, and Friday was my day to cook. And I found myself, I just didn't feel comfortable in that semi-military environment. And we only had 5% of our time spent on actual crises. It was 95% sitting around talking about what side jobs we're going to do. And that is a wonderful profession for those who are comfortable with it. But I didn't. And I ended up homeless as a result of my detours. And when I met my wife, I was literally living in a truck. And they repossessed the truck because I didn't make payments. So I'm not making that up. And my wife still married me, even though her pastor said, don't do it.
Well, the pastor had a point. Your house got repossessed.
Yeah, he had a point. I wouldn't have married me if I were her.
No,
So,
neither. But it's telling that throughout all of this, you still don't give up. Again, at 53, you found the Good Samaritan Home. At 61, you get your doctorate. And at 75, you publish your first novel that you spent 10 years writing. That is stick-to-itiveness that I've never heard.
that's actually true. And did I tell you it took 200 rejections to get it published?
That's you cannot be stopped, which is what I like about this is what I like about. I mean, there's a lot to like about you, obviously, but you're a late in life success story. I want to be a late in life success story. This is my attempt at late in life success. I know. So I'm 44. Behind me is Anthony Bourdain and Charles Bukowski. They both made it at 44. So I figured if I don't make it at 44, I'm out. But you've given me some help. I mean, some hope. At 53, I could found a home. You know.
Maybe the best way to approach it is in the movie Officer and a Gentleman. Richard Gere is trying to go through officer candidate school, and he comes in with this individualistic attitude. I'm going to do it for me, and the sergeant tries to break that attitude, and he tries to get him to wash out because he knows that he's not a good officer if he thinks in terms of only himself. And at the last scene, he says, "Quit, Mayo, quit. I want you to quit." And he's in the mud and the dirt. And Mayo says, "I can't. I got nowhere else to go."
Oh.
And see, that's from in my perspective. I'm not that noble a person. Many times I stuck with what I'm doing because I had nowhere else to go. So,
Kind of worked out though.
Yeah, we're surrounded by all the Germans at the Battle of the Bulge, and it's not like we can say, "I think we'll pass."
I'm going to go home. Yeah. If you're going through hell, there's only one way to get through it, and that's to keep going. Right? Isn't that what they said?
That's exactly. And we went through 7 years of legal battles to found Good Samaritan Home. But in the end, very simply, the people who waved at us with one finger now use all their fingers.
See, happy ending. Yeah. And now you're on the show, which is the pinnacle of your career, which is very exciting.
Actually, in many ways it is. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to, this graphic on the far right is your book. We're going to get into this too. But again, I want to cover some news stories because the American public demands our opinions on such things. And I tried to pick stories that are, related to your area of expertise. So this is from City Journal, which I'm not familiar with, but the internet tells me is very right leaning as far as publications go. It's by Tom Wolfe. So I'm going to just give you the first couple paragraphs. This is San Francisco's promising drug policy shift. So he says, for more than 2 decades, harm reduction, in parentheses, or air quotes, was the official policy of San Francisco. As a formerly homeless heroin and fentanyl addict in recovery, again, this is the author, I saw firsthand how this policy, which tried to make illegal drug use safer, devastated the city. In my 6 months on the street in 2018, I watched the harm reduction groups hand out free drug paraphernalia. In the years since, I've seen harm reduction workers distribute crack and meth pipes without telling users how to get treatment. He goes on to say the results were disastrous. By 2021, San Francisco had more than 8,000 homeless people and recorded 720 overdose deaths. By 2024, some 1,000 drug dealers roamed the streets, and officials had seized 132 kilos of fentanyl in a 12-month period. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the prison and homeless populace tend to have drug issues or drug-related issues. Is this largely true, would you say?
About 80% would be drug and alcohol and mental health issues.
Okay, so they all go part and parcel. Where do you stand on the government issuing clean needles, clean meth pipes? And I'm big into bourbon. Do you think Boston will ever give me clean glasses and giant ice cubes for my habit?
When I read that article, I thought, the San Francisco has been faced with this homeless issue for years, and it's gotten to the point where it's actually impacted their economy. People are staying away. They don't want to drive into San Francisco because their cars are broken into and the streets are literally tinted. They can't get through them. And I mentioned that in my novel at one point, in 1968. Daniel, the main character, asked the question, what happened to the city of love? And what happened to the most beautiful city in the world that I heard about? And his mentor said, drugs. Heroin changed everything. And it went from free love to very expensive love. Let's put it that way. And here, let me give you an example. In our house, we are partnered. We have 21 houses now in the Western Ohio region. And so it's called independent housing, meaning it's not locked down. It's not a shelter. It's an independent house where you're given temporary free housing so you can get a job and get back on your feet. And you can stay 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a year, depending on your need. And the idea is that homelessness has been shown statistically to be the number one detriment to rehabilitation when you get out of prison. So, but now I could do what San Francisco is doing and simply say, here's your place.
Yeah.
Have at it. And what we would have very quickly is chaos, and nobody can rehabilitate in chaos. So we have a set of rules and regulations, and it's an agreement that you sign with us that says, number one, first and foremost, I'm going to make my bed in the morning. Because making my bed in the morning says that I respect what you've given me, and I respect myself and my roommate enough to keep it clean. And that is a tangible way of rehabilitation. It's a shift from the I pronoun that says, I want that, I'm going to steal it, to the we pronoun that says, what's good for us. And so we have a curfew that says that you cannot be out past 10 o'clock unless you're working, and you have to document that because you're responsible and you're accountable. And it's not a matter of curfew. It's a matter of accountability. It's a matter of fitting within the confines of your agreement. You agreed to live here and abide by rules. And if you don't, nothing personal, you're just not ready for our house. And we had to terminate 2 guys yesterday because they brought alcohol in. And alcohol's legal, but it's also a key issue in what got you to prison.
So you take a holistic approach. And I think obviously what San Francisco is missing is a holistic approach. What they're doing is a very downstream solution to a very upstream problem, I think. Yeah. And so I mentioned City Journal, according to the internet, it's a very right-wing leaning publication, but I tried to find anybody that says that San Francisco's experiment is working, and categorically it has failed across the board. Now, I went to Portugal a few years ago, and they have, they've decriminalized all drugs. But if you get caught, you have to go through a dissociation commission. It's made up of a doctor, a social worker, and a legal advisor. They give you help. They give you opportunities for counseling, for employment, for housing. So they seem to take your approach more holistic rather than just giving them, listen, I'm sure clean needles does a good job of preventing, disease to some degree, but it just seems like there's so much more to going into treating an addict than that, right?
And I'm wondering if that's not a dismissive attitude that says, we'll just provide you with your issue. We're not going to really address the issue. Why are you looking to find an alternative reality? Remember back in the 60s, there was a song about, I forget who did it, but it talked about going on the first space travel. And they said, you spend 4 days in space, and when you come back, it's still the same old place. Mm-hmm. And so we can talk about all these programs being wonderful, but what is the issue that causes you to want to get high?
Right.
Why? What are you trying to escape from? And almost invariably, what we found is our residents come from homes where their father is non-existent. The mother is either working too much, or she's on welfare and in her own world of drug addiction, and you're left alone to grow up literally on the street. And you end up being abused sexually, physically, emotionally. And so you become an abuser because that's all you know. So it's a family issue so many times. And that's an issue that is much harder to address than simply giving somebody a needle.
So you're saying a free crack pipe, a free clean crack pipe isn't going to solve all their problems. That's fucking weird.
It will buy you a few minutes.
Yeah. You know what's strange too? From San Francisco's point of view, you're on the West Coast, beautiful weather, you're giving out free drug paraphernalia, and they're like, we have a homeless problem? That's fucking strange, isn't it? Like, if I was homeless, that seems kind of ideal. Utopian in many ways.
Well, one thing I found, I mentioned earlier that I had gone to a Quaker graduate school, and they're good people. But you think Quakers are being very tolerant and accepting. But what I found was that the left has the same fundamentalism as the right.
Oh, yeah. It's just everybody. No one's tolerant.
Yeah. And so I had to be very careful. I
Fun.
couldn't mention certain topics because it would inflame the conversation.
Oh boy. All right. Well, listen, I want to get to you. So let's get to the second story. This is from the Associated Press. So what they did is they did an investigation into California homeless centers. And I think this really is pertinent to your mission here. So these are the 7 takeaways that they got studying the California homeless system, California homeless shelter system. So what happened is the Supreme Court passed Grants Pass, which essentially allows governments to make sleeping on the streets illegal. So now they can find people, they can send them to jail for sleeping outside. So local and state officials bet big on shelters. So because it's illegal now to sleep outside, if you want it to be, they've created a lot of these shelters. Here's the problem though. Shelters, this is the number 2 finding, they're deadlier than jails. Annual shelter deaths tripled between 18 and 24. A total of 2,007 people died, according to the data obtained by the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. That's nearly twice as many deaths as California jails saw in the same period. That's concerning. Number 3, inside shelters, chaos frequently breaks loose. There's black mold, there's bed bugs, there's domestic violence, there's sex crimes. There's fewer than 1 in 4 people who cycle through shelters move into permanent houses. Number 5, scandals have plagued fast-growing shelter operations. There's inappropriate relationships. There's fraud going on, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. There's local and state oversight that's failing. They're not reporting the things they should be, like dangerous shelter conditions. And experts, this is the 7th finding, experts are saying that there's several potential solutions, one of which is not so much shelters, but maybe rent assistance to get these people into their own places. This is something that you deal with firsthand. How do you feel about the homeless shelter ecosystem, and what do you think they could be doing better?
We don't have as much of a problem as shelter issues as some of the larger cities, but I resonate very clearly, very strongly with what you're saying, because people will come to us because our program is set up to be a more apartment style. We have duplexes and fourplexes, so you might have 3 or 4 people in one apartment sharing, like a college apartment would be. So it's more, you get more privacy, but the shelter itself in Dayton is 200 people, and you get that bunk idea. You see all sorts of strange people hanging out front, and they're all drinking out of their bottles in the bag along the fence. And the neighbors are very concerned about the attracting of those people to their neighborhood. But the word on the street was that bed bugs alone are a major issue in the shelters, but you can get your socks stolen off your feet while you're sleeping. And they would rather sleep outside, because at least they know their back is safe because they can see that there's nobody around. But in the shelter, it's the feeling is number 1 is dirtier and it's more dangerous. Yeah. So when they get to our place, they feel like they've come to heaven, and ours is nothing spectacular. It's just clean and it's safe. And that's because we have the accountability factor. We have it's like Ronald Reagan said, we trust, but we verify.
Yeah. So again, this is like any issue, it's multifactorial, but simply giving people clean paraphernalia and giving them a place to sleep indoors at night doesn't seem to be enough to solve this problem.
There is a place for the temporary, particularly in the colder climates, if somebody's going to die on the street. The problem is you can build that into your budget, and maybe the issue is we're trying to solve the outcomes, but what is the root cause of it? Why are people? And I think that comes back to where the community has to be much more involved in, I don't want to say mentoring, but being involved in some sort of connection with people. And maybe, and the real issue might be the fact that we've closed down mental health hospitals and housing, and we're putting these people in shelters and in jails who simply cannot survive in that environment. Maybe that's the real issue.
That seems to be the thing, because if you take, just whatever, a random homeless person, let's say that you give them a place to stay, and you give them clean paraphernalia until they can get off the drug, and you give them counseling. Not all of those people are equipped mentally to be released back into the general public, right? There's just some people that have debilitating mental illness and they need to go somewhere, and there's nowhere for them to go. What do you do?
We have every once in a while we get somebody who's simply not equipped for our house. They're not independent enough. And the alternative we look for is a group home setting, which seems to be a compromise where you get more intensive oversight, but yet you're still not treated as if you're in the some mass hospital. So, but we saw it was cost prohibitive to have the mental health facilities, and they often degenerated into bedlam, and there were abuses. So we said everybody needs to have their own independence. And I have mental health caseworkers say that I can't tell somebody to clean their house, and they live in a hoarder's nightmare.
Right.
And because I can't tell them that they have to do that, because they have to take responsibility for their own decisions. But mentally, they're not capable of that. They need more structure than independent housing allows. So I think you're right. We've gone from left extreme to right extreme, and the answer is in between.
Simply being, like, we don't like taxpayer dollars going to mental institutions, so let's just stop mental institutions, hasn't solved any problem. Those people still exist. They still must go somewhere. I don't know. All right, let's get to this third story, because I think this is very pertinent to your area of expertise. So this is from the Wall Street Journal. This is after prison comes big child support debt, and some call it welfare reform for men. So this is an older article, but I did want to bring it up because, again, I think it's pertinent to what you do. This is the first paragraph. In an attempt to shore up support among Black voters, obviously this is old, Kamala Harris proposed small business loans and training programs aimed at steering them towards high-paying jobs. This is people just getting out of prison. Whether the virtues of her plans, they overlook a real-world situation facing millions of Black men. The combination of a prison record and daunting child support payments, they have no way of paying after they get out of prison. Some of these numbers are unbelievable. 1/3 of Black men are estimated to have at least one felony conviction. The National Institute of Justice has reported that one of the biggest obstacles of reentry is the size of the parents' child support debt, which can range from $20,000 to $36,000, depending on the state of data issued. Okay, so in terms of recidivism, you go to prison, you have a felony on your record. You go to get a job, you can't get hired because you have a felony on your record.
Yeah.
You might turn towards the thing that got you in prison in the first place, which is probably crime-related, drug selling, dealing, whatever it is. You're not paying your debt back to society because you're unhireable. There's no other options. You have crippling child support debt. What do you do? That's a pretty damning system. It seems like once you're in you're screwed, whether you're in or out. Has that been what you've seen? How do you fix this?
What I see very often is somebody says, my mental health or my back or my illness, I'm applying for SSDI. And that's very common. And truth is, many of them have a legitimate concern, and they could apply for it. The downside is, if you get it, you make $940 or less a month.
Right.
And so the child support won't come out of that, to my knowledge. And so you can't rent a place that costs $600 or $700 a month. So you end up taking that money and living probably in somebody's couch. Right. And so the whole Social Security system in many cases has been an immediate answer to something that needs a long-term solution. You're absolutely right on that. So, but I see many times a guy will say, they're taking all of my money. So there's no point in me getting a job because I won't make enough to live on anyway. I'm just going to apply for SSDI.
But okay, so again, well, we talked about this before we went on air, but the current administration cutting costs. Are we worried that it's going to get worse for people, that there's going to be less money for these people and less money for, like, what's going to happen to these people that are living on the margins and the fringes? It doesn't seem to me that there's any reasonable way towards, there's no path to victory here. Is there?
I didn't agree with many of Lyndon Johnson's policies, and I definitely didn't agree with Richard Nixon on many of the Vietnamese policies, and the way Jimmy Carter handled the Iran issue. I didn't agree with him, and particularly when I was paying 14% interest on a piece of property I bought. It was a terrible time, and so when I say I don't agree with Mr. Trump on many of his policies, that's what we Americans do. We can disagree about policy, but I'm concerned with now. It's different than it's ever been. It's simply we've moved into a realm where it's not about cost saving. It's about money shifting
right
from and you and I, the very people who supported Mr. Trump, it's when they thought he was a populist. He's actually an elitist, an oligarch who's taking the money and shifting it to his own people. And these tariffs and tax cuts are going to come from you and me. They're going to come from the farmers. They're going to come from the people who voted for him. And I've been doing a lot of reading about the pre-war Germany, and the parallels are frightening. Mm-hmm. And this, to me, it's very similar to '68 when we had all the protests, except the difference is we felt there's at least a semblance of structure and respecting government for the Constitution.
Oh,
right now, I'm not seeing that. And I think we are on the precipice of what could be a place of no return.
See what you just said? That's going to get you thrown in jail soon. So
yeah.
You know.
Now, that sounds paranoid, but I actually have been telling my wife, if this happens, if the FBI were to come to the door, because something I wrote on Substack, and I try to be reasoned. I try not to be a bomb thrower. I try to let Mr. Trump's words speak for him.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. We're in a place where Woodward and Bernstein were afraid in meeting with Deep Throat because they were afraid that Nixon's people would come. And we look at that and say, that's crazy. The president would never do that. But the truth is, we are at that place.
Yeah. I think they're testing the waters with these students and their visas. And if half of us are okay with it, then they're going to be like, well, now we can do it with American citizens. I think this is
actually, I agree with you. I absolutely, because he said this in 2015. I can walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and still get elected.
Oh, it's never been truer. So some student with a visa writes an op-ed piece, and she's a threat to national security. War plans on signal, that's nothing. It's just, there is no, like, getting mad at hypocrisy at this point is pointless because there is no, like, oh, you're right. You know, it's just, it's a moving target. Whatever they do is right. Whatever they do is 100% right. You can't question it. And it's a weird place to be in.
And that's exactly what happened in 1932 in Germany, is that the people voted in Mr. Hitler, and then he immediately changed the structure so that he was able to say, let's remove all of those people who disagree with me.
Yeah. I'm also mad at the system, though, too, because we were raised believing that there were checks and balances and nobody could do stuff like he's doing. And that was totally, as it turns out, totally farcical. You know, he's going to run for a third term. They're going to get rid of the 22nd Amendment. Nothing matters anymore. It's a real, I'm just sick of I'm living in precedented times. I just want to live in, can we just be normal for a little while? It's been a rough 30 years.
And I think it's very important right now. We could talk about what the doom and gloom prospect, and they're legitimate, but right now, it may be an unprecedented opportunity for you and I because of our small light. Just one little thing we do. Sometimes it might even be helping somebody across the street, opening a door for somebody. Some act of kindness may make a change that snowballs. And in this very dark time, that light suddenly looks like a lighthouse. So what I'm trying to look for ways, how can I shine my light somewhere X, where next can I do something? And so to me, it's right now it's Substack or on Facebook. I try to say, let's look at the data. Let's come to reason. I even wrote a comment to somebody who was a bomb thrower on Facebook. And I said, I respect you too much of our 50 years together to simply denigrate you into some sort of meme.
Yeah.
Let's look at our facts. Mm-hmm. And he sent me back something, as I mentioned before. told me to do something if I could not anatomically do.
Well, it's nothing will make you feel worse about humanity than the comment section on anything. Anything. And that's been true forever. It's just worse now.
That's a very good point. And my wife says I'm crazy to even look at it, but I keep trying to whistle into the dark.
Well, there's nobody better suited than you to take abuse and then figure out ways to turn it into something positive. So I wanted to talk about your book, but can you talk about, just give me the high level of Good Samaritan Home and how it came to be and everything that you had to go through to get to where you are now.
Good Samaritan Home was what happened was I had been through many, many detours, and I had struggled all my life. And I was 53 years old. I was even a minister at one point, and the people voted me out because I wasn't political enough. And so here I was, homeless, and I didn't have a job, 53 with a family. And I said to my wife, let's do something that we've always talked about but never could do. Let's help people who are struggling more than us. So we found the only house in town we could afford. It was 150 years old, and started remodeling it as a shelter. And a prison chaplain that I had known asked me to take a man from prison to offer him temporary shelter, and we did. And that was the beginning of Good Samaritan Home. We became a legal entity, and that one man led to 2 men, 3 men, 4 men. And we've grown from a single house to now we have 21 houses and 10 staff. And in the past 25 years, we've helped mentor and house 2,500 men and women coming from prison.
That's ungoddamn believable. In the beginning, were you afraid to hang out with formerly incarcerated people all the time, having them live in a house that you own? I mean, that's a daunting task.
Well, actually, having somebody in my own personal house was actually more frightening than it is now, because we have separate houses and you have to have space. But we couldn't afford that. We had only our house. And you're right. It is not frightening so much as it's intrusive to have strangers in your space. And I wouldn't recommend it, but I definitely would recommend having something. And that's what we did. We bought a house across the street. My wife had gotten a little inheritance, and we used that money to buy another house and remodel it.
Oh my God. So your wife gets inheritance and you don't blow it on a Corvette or a vacation. You blow it on helping people who just got out of prison, not be homeless.
Actually, we absolutely did. In fact, it came from when her parents passed. So we put a picture of her parents on the wall, and so we called it Fitzpatrick House in honor of them. But you're absolutely right. She could have taken the whole amount. It was $80,000, and we used the whole $80,000 to buy and remodel this house. And we've had that house. It's now a 3-plex, and it's housed people for 25 years.
You have the moral high ground in any argument. You know that, right? Like anytime somebody starts questioning your character, you can be like, do you know what I did? Do you know what I did? Do you know what I do? 2,500 people. Most people don't help any people, let alone 2,500 people.
Maybe the reason is, Eric, I've never been to prison, but I've made a lot of mistakes. And I think back there, but for the grace of God, I could easily have gone that direction in some way or another. And so if I can help somebody so they don't make the same mistakes I did, theirs may be extreme, but they're still the same.
This is a pretty shitty, salacious question, but do you know what their crimes were? And does that affect the way that you think about them or treat them, or just your concern level?
We know, but we don't dwell on it, and we don't make an issue of it. The idea is who is the most in need. And to be quite candid, we don't talk about it much, but 60% of our residents have committed a sex offense.
Oh my God. You were divine. Something in you're not human. So I listen to this podcast called Ear Hustle. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it started at San Quentin State Prison, and I think it's on season, I don't know, like 11 at some point. I like the cast and crew. You get to know them, and then you find out their crime. I'm like, fuck those guys. And these are the people I know on the radio. And the fact that you are able, I mean, oh my God, you're better than most humans. You know that, right?
No, trust me, I don't. But what I've found, and I'm not making excuses, but there is a percentage of people who took a plea because they were facing 40 years. They took a plea even though they were not guilty. They may have been guilty of something else.
Yeah.
But the system is such that Even with a public defender, you just can't win. And Donald Trump is a good example of what a high-paid attorney can do. He can buy you justice indefinitely.
That's true.
But the poor don't have that. And so how many people admitted to a sex offense they didn't do?
That's true. Oh man. Okay. So you get yeah, I'm sure the 2,500 people that you've helped have had sentences, from a few months to a few years. What is the first 72 hours like when they come to you? Is it shock? Is it because let's keep in mind, these people have nowhere else to go. There's no family that's taking them in. You are their only salvation. So what is that like?
The young ones who've only been to jail or entry-level prison, they're actually harder to deal with because they think they're smarter than us. They're just doing another con. But those who've been locked down into real prison or been down for many years, I've had some down for 30 years. And when they get out, imagine you've been in a 6x12 cell where 6 times a day you have to march and be counted. You have certain schedule that you cannot deviate. Everything is the same. You make no choices. Then all of a sudden, they open the gate and say, best of luck.
Yeah.
Get a job.
Yeah.
And you haven't worked ever because you went to jail when you're 18. And so, number one, you take this and say, how do I get a job on this thing?
Right.
And
I think we've all seen The Shawshank Redemption 85,000 times because it's the only thing that TNT plays during the day. But the scene at the end where the old timer gets out and he just can't handle, he's always asking his boss when he can go to the bathroom, what he can do, what he can't do, and he can't handle it. He kills himself. And then Red does kind of the same thing. But that must be like 30 years into coming to the internet. That's oh my God. So
it's an absolute shock. And that's why we don't say, just sit back and enjoy. We say, let me help you take the first step. And what we try to do is, number one, help you get food stamps. We connect you with what's called a reentry office, where the local county government has a training program to how to get a job. And Ohio actually is extremely progressive in its reentry and rehabilitation programming. I think it's probably far ahead of the curve because we dropped recidivism from 50% to 30% statewide.
So let's talk about recidivism for a second, because the recidivism rates are just high nationwide. I mean, Ohio might be better, but in general, they're not good. Is that correct?
It's about 50 to 70%.
Okay, that's not good, I don't think. From what I understand, it costs something like $109 a day, which works out.
You're absolutely right.
It works out to about 40 grand a year. And again, this is one of those upstream, downstream issues where I think what we're doing is very downstream, but this is a lot of money for prisoners. Wouldn't it make sense to cut down on recidivism rates from a dollar and cents point of view? If we can get these people back into the community with jobs, paying taxes, isn't that just a net gain across the board if it's possible?
You just made the argument that I presented to the city council for years. And because I had reams of data saying exactly that same thing. And I can show conclusively that not only do you not pay the in-prison costs, but when you're working, you're paying taxes locally, you're buying locally, you're paying child support locally. So it's not just the $40,000; it's about $60,000 savings.
So
that absolutely makes sense economically.
And you're talking about $109 a day, probably just to house and feed them. And then any surgery they might need, any medical cost, that skyrockets, obviously. This is what I don't understand about things. I mean, this is off topic a little bit, but legalize prostitution, tax it. And then you have, that's one side of it. But now you don't have cops arresting prostitutes, putting them in jail for a night, letting them out the next day. They can go do something else. Everybody can go do something else, tax it. Drugs too. I think decriminalization of drugs. I mean, weed's legal now, and I never liked weed to begin with. I'm more of a party drug. I'm waiting for medicinal cocaine, but I'm sure that we've made a shit ton of money with the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. I just think if we're crying about not having enough money all the time, there's ways that we can stop being so stupid. This is one of them, I think.
Yeah, I think the short run, the idea of decriminalizing sounds like it would work, but I think in the long term we're going to run into major issues, and we talked about that with the idea of giving needles and such. Yeah. Are we changing the whole perception of what I think what made America the strong economic powerhouse it's always been, was that people came and they were determined to work and to better it so their children would have a better life than they had. So instead of saying, you're not paying me enough, we'd say, I'll get a second job. I'll get a third job.
Yeah.
And, we don't have to spend $60,000 for a car. We would have a 10-year-old car because we want to put our kids through college.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing that there's a shift in our attitude from delayed gratification as Americans to instantaneous gratification. How do I get it today? And how do I get the best today?
Yeah.
Just a good example was, you look, just sit on the street and watch the cars come by, and you never see an old car anymore.
No, well, everything's disposable, you know?
That's right. Everybody, you know, they can't afford a $60,000 car, but they're driving a $60,000 car.
I mean, I'm working hard so someday my kids can have clean needles, but I get your point. I think, you know, what's weird too is, so the alpha male thing, you've heard of this in the zeitgeist, all these cool guys online are alpha males, which I think people that study wolves have proven that there's no real like alpha male, but if there is a leader of the pack, you know what the leader of the pack does? It goes and hunts and then brings food back for the women and children. That's what an alpha male is, historically speaking. And I think, you know who's a real alpha male? People that you know used to fight to make sure that their kids weren't working in mines, that there was a weekend, that there was a 9 to 5. Like they were fighting, and like in this case, literally fighting, punching cops, and they were getting their point across to a system that was exploiting them, instead of, you know, selling online courses and acting misogynistic on the internet. So I think we've lost the core piece of what it to be alpha male is. Shouldn't they be taking care of the community, making sure that their kids and parents and spouses are in a better place? You know, does that make more sense? Where's the alpha male in the white community? I would say on our side, we have Pete Buttigieg, but we cannot accept a gay man in power. So that's never going to happen. I think like AOC, all the outspoken Democrats aren't, you know, heterosexual white males. This is, you know, our side is very beta. Like we just roll over and take it. We lose so often that I almost think that they have to be on the same side. It's like the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington, the Generals. Is that what they are? Like ostensibly they're playing a game and one wins and one loses all the time, but they're both getting paychecks from the same, you know, puppet master. I think that's what's happening here.
You actually raise a very good point, that the Democrats have presented themselves as being without direction, without leadership, and without a purpose. They're just they're proposing what seems to be very extreme examples that the mainstream, the guys in Muncie, Indiana, can't understand or accept. And whereas Mr. Trump comes across as a man's man, even though it's a facade, here's what my granddaughter said: at least he can make decisions.
Right. Yeah.
People are looking for a strong man, and we haven't seen. Richard Nixon presented himself as a strong man. Ronald Reagan was a strong man. Yeah. But he did it in a different way. Reagan said, the light shining on a hill, the city on a hill, a better morning coming. Yeah. He was very positive and encouraging.
So the country knows that we like, you know, strong men, and what the Democrats do is they lose to an obese, diaper wearing, orange moron. That's how, like, just anything would beat him that resembles anything reasonable. But we can't. This is why I think it's the Harlem Globetrotters, you know, the Savannah Bananas, the baseball team. They always beat the party animals. It's the same thing. We're just we're the professional wrestling jobber. We just keep losing to the superstar. It's very fucking bizarre.
And I think what has discouraged me more than anything else, Mr. Trump can do anything he wants. He can come up saying that the moon is actually made out of cheese and we never visited there in '68. But it's the acquiescence from reasoned, intelligent, and moral people who simply say, I'll be primaried if I don't go along. Yeah. And I hear, you know, for example, J.D. Vance, I very much enjoyed his novel because he came from my background. I identified with his story. Yeah. And I even wrote him a letter saying, thank you for your book. I enjoyed it. We come from similar backgrounds. But today, I'm just embarrassed at what I consider to be a denial of everything he said he believed in. Yeah. And he's doing it in the name of his power. That's all it comes out to be. And that he's not alone. I see Republican after Republican after Republican. They're saying things that 2 years ago they didn't say. They said the opposite.
I
That
think
concerns me.
it is concerning, but I think it's the lunatic fringe variation of just take the W. So we went through the Bernie or bust thing where people wouldn't vote for Hillary because they were just going to throw their vote away. My point was just take the W, get Hillary in office, and then figure out your squabbles there. They just took the W by standing behind Trump, and now they continue to, because standing against him in any way isn't going to get you anything. So just continue to win. Like, they're steamrolling everything. Why dissent at this point? There's no opposition. They can do whatever they want. Why be a dissenting voice of that? For morality? Oh, stop. It's never going to happen. We're Americans.
Yeah. When you think about my parents grew up in the Depression, and they went through World War II. So they grew up with rationing for gas, rationing for food. My mother picked up coal that had dropped from the trucks onto the street and brought that coal chinks back to the house to heat with. She grew up. In fact, she never went to a restaurant until I was married and my wife took her to a restaurant. That was something only the wealthiest of the wealthy could do.
Yeah.
So she grew up in sacrifice. I grew up in affluence, relatively.
Right.
And my children and grandchildren grew up in a norm where it's you have 2 and 3 cars. You travel to your second home. You go on vacations to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
I don't do that, but my grandchildren have done that. And so I don't think we as a nation understand the whole concept of sacrifice.
Or perspective. Like, perspective does not enter our, it just doesn't work. I think what we need is a nice depression. We need to start collecting coal on the streets again to be warm. That'll set us straight.
I hate to say that, but I think there's some truth in that, because when I went through the 7 years of conflict, I mentioned it was so intense that I had police protection at some meetings.
Yeah.
In fact, I was at a courthouse to get a TPO against somebody, and the guy stabbed me in front of the courthouse.
You got stabbed?
Well, it was superficial, but it got my attention.
No one's ever stabbed me. You superficial or not? That's sacrifice.
He was mentally ill, and he had been one of our residents in our shelter, and he was seeing me as the great Leviathan. Who knows?
Wow.
But my point is that during those hard times, when I felt like it was as close to being in the South in 1962 and being a black man, I felt like I was a persona non grata in my community. But my mind was so clear and I was so focused and I felt so free because I was doing something that I believed in, and I felt like I was doing it for the greater good. Yeah. And I think that comes back to this idea of sacrifice. When we have to sacrifice, I think things are clearer, like our parents and grandparents did in the 30s. They sacrificed. They left Oklahoma to go to California for a better life. Even though it was the grapes of wrath, it ended up producing Merle Haggard, who was actually able to make it after the grapes of wrath.
You know what's interesting about you? You were a minister. It's the Good Samaritan Home. There are biblical implications, and I think but you don't talk about God. You talk about sacrifice. How much does faith have to do with your journey and what you've done and continue to do?
That's a very good question. When we were going through the hard times, I had a pastor come to my house and say, he wants to support me, and how can he help? And do I ask people if they're saved when they come to our house? And I said, I don't ask that question. I ask them if they're hungry, because that's the only language they understand. And he said, well, I can't support you then.
Wow.
Because I was not responding in his religious requirements. And I feel that my faith absolutely motivates what we're doing, not to change you to believe and look like me. My faith motivates me to help alleviate your suffering in some level. And when that happens, that will allow God to speak in ways that I can't.
Jesus Christ. That's good. All right, listen, we're coming up. I don't want to keep you forever. Running as fast as I can, not autobiographical, but you've created sort of a character or an avatar in the main character, Daniel, I think his name is, who's been through a bunch of things that you've been through and other people that you've met and seen and have helped have been through. And this was, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, to try to put a narrative around the sort of things people go through to get them to where they are.
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, when I present data, nobody hears it.
Right.
And I use the analogy that if I were to go on a ship and I say, we're going to have a documentary on lifeboat safety and everybody has to attend, nobody would listen to that. They would not sit through a documentary on lifeboat safety. But if I showed the movie Titanic and you saw Jack and Rose and how lifeboats could have saved the entire
right.
everybody. But so that's what I ended up doing here. That nobody was listening to the data on reentry and rehabilitation because it's always those people. Yeah. So what I did was I wrote a story about what I call every man. He's you and me. He grew up in a working class home where he was abused in private. Yeah. His mother was mentally ill. His father was alcoholic. And he ran to his pastor for support, and his pastor abused him. Jesus. And so he spent the rest of his life running as fast as he can to find normal. And when you're born into abnormal, you're born with a limp. And Daniel had a limp, and the best he could run was very slow, and he couldn't catch up. But then when he met Kate, and he was able to find healing and forgiveness, but even with the healing and forgiveness, you still have a limp. And so some of us, we just can't do the hard body on Facebook where we're always handsome and always successful and we're driving a new car. And I look in the mirror and I say, this is who I am. Yeah. And I can't compete with, all my life. I couldn't look like Clint Eastwood or Harrison Ford because those people are images. Yeah. So what I am, Daniel Robinson, I've found is everyone's story. And what I wanted to do, the reason it took me 10 years was it's not just a story. I wanted to convey the emotions that I felt all those years and that my residents have felt of isolation and aloneness and second chances. And the end result was when we published it last year, I ended up getting 33 awards for literary and historical fiction because it's a Forrest Gump type story where he travels through history. But most important, the readers have written back and said, I felt Daniel. I lived Daniel. I couldn't stop reading about Daniel. Daniel was me. And that to me, that's the message. And maybe we can influence our communities with Daniel's story instead of my data.
Your perseverance, even in across the board, but again, all the rejections, and then it ends up winning 33 awards is just, that's incredible. Most people give up after a few. You just don't give up.
Well, there's a part of me wants to take a couple of those rewards and send it to those agents in New York and say, eat your heart out.
Yeah. Well, I used to say this about J.K. Rowling. I'm no huge Harry Potter fan, but she was famously rejected like 20 times, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I would call them every single day and just be like, just so you remember me, J.K. Rowling sent you the book about the wizard? I know.
Well, what happened was Don Quixote Press is an outsider publisher for outsider writers like me, but I have to do a lot of the publishing or publication and promoting myself. But what it's done is it's got me out into Facebook and to LinkedIn and Instagram and Substack. I write a column on Substack and I'm talking with you. And I've done 73 of these podcasts in the past couple of months. And what we're doing is we're talking about second chances. And I want to get the dialogue out there because if we don't offer second chances, the only voice out there is the immigrant invasion. And hatred and demagoguery. And so I have to speak out, not just for my sake, but for the community's sake.
This was the best of the 73 though, right?
Actually, it is. It's a lot of fun considering that I was cross-eyed when I got on here. I'm actually feeling no pain right now.
See, I straightened you out. Here's the other thing that I like what you said, because it's something that I think about a lot, is the concept of normal and how dangerous that can be. If you're a child that grows up in an abusive household and people are drinking and doing drugs and you see a bunch of fucked up shit, that is your normal. You don't know enough to know that that's not normal. And I think that's a thing that I don't hear people. It's never discussed, but your normal is so goddamn dangerous or helpful. Like if your normal is affluence and working hard and entrepreneurship, whatever the fuck it is, and then that is just it's very unlikely that you're going to go and get caught in an environment where everything's fucked up. So normal is just this, you got to correct people's normal, I think. And I don't know how you do that, but
the society has shifted so much from when I grew up. You may have been unhappy in your marriage, but you stayed together. Divorce was just not something that happened, but now it's very, very common. And so we have a picture of my wife and I in our living room, and we've been together almost 50 years. And we both have our own issues. And so we lean on one another. And by leaning on one another, we can walk straight.
Yeah.
And so that picture is for my grandkids and my kids, to remind them that there is stability out there, and we try to be an anchor that in a society that's constantly shifting, where there is no standard, there is no acceptable behavior. It's whatever you want to do. We try to present some semblance of normality as we historically have defined normal.
Right. And you're an extreme example of that too, because she stayed with you through homelessness. And then also, hey, listen, a criminal is going to live in our house. So she's very, you know what I mean? This is, you're up against it.
That's true. You're exactly right.
Right. And these are only two examples that I know. I'm sure if we sat down and talked, there's a few more.
Be careful saying this, because now my wife's going to demand more from me because of what I put her through.
I have her on tomorrow's episode. We're going to talk about it. All right. One last question before we go. And this is probably too big of a question, and it's probably impossible to answer, but a blank check solution to a better path for these people. We are going to put people in prison. They are eventually going to get let out. What is a better way, with those guidelines, what's a better way to get them back into the community? What would you like to see the government do? Or is it the community's responsibility? Is that unrealistic? If you could do anything, what would you do to make sure that the system operates a little bit better?
I'm going to use Ohio as an example because it's working. For 25 years, they've had the Ohio plan of reentry, and it's in the community. It's not just prison is necessary for a time, but rehabilitation must occur in the community. So I would say allow people to be employed. Don't just dismiss them because they have a felony. Allow them to be housed. Give them a second chance, because if you weren't given a second chance, you may not be where you are today. I guarantee you I wouldn't be here without a fourth or fifth chance. And they will fall down. Statistically, rehabilitation from drugs takes 6 or 7 failures before you finally kick it. So how much more so a background where your normal is so distorted that you think abuse is normal? It's going to take failures till you find a new normal where you no longer abuse or allow abuse. So I would say this is a biblical principle. Forgive as you've been forgiven.
You're such a good human. You're such a good human.
Yeah. Hey, tell my wife that, please.
I will. I'm going to write her a strong worded letter. I know, listen, I know he's put you through some shit, but I got to tell you, it's real sweet of you.
Maybe it's a sense, there's a sense of duty and responsibility, not just to my community, but to my maker.
Yeah.
Is if we believe in a creator, if we believe we're all created in that image, in God's image, that means black, white, successful, unsuccessful, the beggar at the gate, they're all created in God's image. So how do we act according to that? That's the defining principle.
See, that's difficult. I'm sort of a nihilist, but I'm not like an angry nihilist. I just don't think anything matters, which is fine. Like, I've accepted that. But I think I would be much better off if I had a guiding light, some sort of a North Star that I really believed in. Because right now it's essentially, bourbon, which I can't. That's not enough. I'm not going out into the community and doing great things in the name of brown booze, but something. I gotta come up with something.
Actually, you really hit on it. And as a culture, we've moved from having a belief in a creator to a belief in material gain.
Right.
And I think this is where the conservatives do have a strong point. If we can go back to something that had, with its shortcomings, at least it presented a sense of stability for the community. And there is a place for the church when it operates as the church, not as a political action committee.
Well, that's the thing. If the church did exactly what you do, which is, I think, closer to the core doctrine, then how could you argue with any part of it? It is just so good, so light, so positive that, you could not argue. No one can say what you're doing is bad or wrong or not full of altruism and goodness. And I don't know.
I often joke about it, but it's true. My best sermons are when I say nothing.
Good point.
Yeah.
I guess we should end on that. Thank you. Listen, stick around for a second. I'm going to end the recording, but you were fantastic. The book, I saw it on Amazon, unbelievable reviews, 33 rewards. It's got to be great. And thank you for doing what you're doing. Listen, I don't live in Ohio, but if we had one of you in every town, the world would be a much, much better place.
You made my day with all your lies, but thank you.
Well, I've been drinking since 7, so it's fun. All right. See you tomorrow, American.
Thank you, folks. My pleasure.
No, thanks.